Making Ukrainians freeze in winter wasn't enough. A Russian strike hitting a moving train on Tuesday in the northeast Kharkiv region. 6 killed as the casualty toll on both sides approaches 2 million, according to an independent study, will weigh the grinding effect of nearly 4 years of all-out war and what it will take to end it. Ahead of more talks in Abu Dhabi, the United States adopting a neutral tone in the face of Russia's demand that Ukraine give up the entirety of the eastern region of Donbas. What are Kyiv's options? What are Europe's options? NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte telling allies to keep on dreaming if they think they can go it alone without a US-led NATO. With the French president due to speak in the coming weeks on an eventual expansion of France's nuclear umbrella to neighbors, and public opinion across the continent rallying against Donald Trump's hostile takeover bid for Greenland, what does 2026 have in store? Today in the France 24 debate, we're asking if it'll be another 4 years of war. With us from the Ukrainian port city of Odessa, Hanna Shelesta, Director of Security Studies from the Foreign Policy Council Ukrainian Prism. Thank you for being with us. Retired General Michel Yakovlev, formerly at the senior command at NATO headquarters, today professor at the Paris School of International Affairs. Welcome back.
Good evening.
From Berlin, former German ambassador to NATO, Joachim Bitterlich. Good to see you.
Good evening. Pleasure.
And from London, we welcome Anna Matvida, visiting senior research fellow at King's College London's Russia Institute. Welcome to the show.
Bonjour.
You could always listen to the show wherever podcasts are streamed. That's a little reminder. Ahead of a second round of U.S. brokered talks between Ukraine and Russia in Abu Dhabi, there was this shock. There are nightly attacks, of course, but the shock of Tuesday's drone attack. 155 passengers aboard a train traveling from the area near Ukraine's western borders with Hungary and Slovakia. It was already in the northeast Kharkiv region when it was hit. 6 killed. Hanna Shelest, this attack visually stunned people, of course. A moving train seems to be unprecedented. Now, we've heard in the last hour the U.S. president saying that he's been on the phone with Vladimir Putin, and there's going to be a 1-week truce in attacks on critical infrastructure. As we speak on air live, we have not heard the Kremlin's response to this. But your thoughts on where it's going for you ordinary Ukrainians at this point?
Ordinary Ukrainians, for example, me now in downtown Odessa, today already 11 hours without electricity, and the announcement that we will not have electricity for at least additional 4 hours. It means that I'm already 11 hours without heating as well, because everything is connected in the old towns. The same situation is in Odessa, in Kyiv. You saw all this news, and you understand that the Russian Federation intensified their attacks against the critical energy infrastructure exactly when the weather is tremendously bad. Just a few days ago, we had -12 in Odessa, what is extremely seldom, but winter is winter. But I cannot say that it is just energy. In general, as soon as the negotiations started, we saw the increase of attacks against the civilians. 2 days ago, the severe attack in downtown Odessa in the UNESCO zone with 4 killed, just residential area, nothing around, one-story buildings, no even suspicious. The train, yet one war crime, because it is clearly visible that it is the civilian and it was not the accident, because it was the intentional strike with the drones and operators saw what they are striking. For us, we understand that it is very difficult, and it is becoming more and more difficult because you cannot repair everything quickly. It is becoming more dangerous, but at the same time, that is the logic to which we've been prepared. Each time the negotiations are coming to the certain point of possibility, or at least probability of some agreement, we have seen the intensification of the Russian attacks. It's been in 2015, it's been in 2018, in 2021, and absolutely the same pattern within the last 4 years of war.
And that pattern, is it staking out a bargaining position, or is it basically Moscow saying, we're not very serious about these talks?
First of all, we've already heard the last 2 months since Anchorage or even earlier that Russia doesn't want ceasefire because since Istanbul, the ceasefire been proposed either by Ukrainians or by Americans several times. Each time either Putin or his staff announced no ceasefire, we are not interested in this. That says a lot. They rejected even the Christmas ceasefire. So first, they are not interested because they still think that they can gain something at the battlefield. The second, it is the bargaining position because they hope that Ukrainian society will pressure Ukrainian president or negotiating team, that they will feel obliged because of the difficult weather conditions to agree at least for something, not understanding that the logic, the motivation of the Russian side is so visible that population are not stupid. We know who is guilty in this. It's not Ukrainian government, but the Russian military who is distracting all the normal life. But the third is it's also the attempt to pressure international community because now you hear from all the capitals like Ukraine, maybe you need to surrender, maybe you need to give up your land because you are in such a difficult conditions. We want something good for you. And that is like, these bad assistance when sometimes your enemies are less dangerous than your friends when they are trying to oppress you without just because they are panicking, they don't understand what is happening. And I would say that last week in Davos, for example, that was quite often what I heard during the coffee breaks from a lot of the experts around, or poor Ukrainians, maybe you need to agree to the Russian conditions.
Michel Yakovlev, we had the French president on Wednesday saying that he'd spoken with his Ukrainian counterpart on the telephone and he'd pledged generators. I don't know how many, but what can allies do when Ukraine is literally in the cold?
Well, generators will help. They won't save the day. It's a nice gesture. By the way, there have been generators by the thousands for the last 4 years. Actually, if you want to plug a generator to your own grid in the house, you need to work on the grid. You can't just put it in the socket and have electricity. You've got to have an inverter. It's called an inverter installed on your le tableau électrique, the switch.
Your switchboard.
Yeah, the switchboard. So how many electricians are available to do that kind of thing? So, and also most of the heating system, from what I understand, in the cities is collective. So power generators, small power generators, won't change anything. For sure, for the last 4 years, many industry and so on have equipped them, have purchased power generators. So to a certain degree, hospitals and so on. So to a certain degree, I understand they can live off the grid for some time. But I mean, we're not going to winter is winter, as Anna said. It helps. It's not a game changer, that's for sure.
All right, nearly 2 million casualties between February 2022 and December of 2025. That's according to the research from the Washington-based Center for Strategic and International Studies think tank. Moscow's forces have borne the brunt of the losses, suffering as many as 325,000 killed out of that estimate. And you see the graphic here on the screen. Anna Medvedeva, your reaction to these numbers that have come out, and your thoughts on how long the two sides can endure and which one can hold out the longer?
Well, there are two questions, I think, in your one question. In fact, I cannot confirm or deny veracity of these numbers because I'm not sure about that the methodology can be checked and independently verified. Having worked in conflict zones worldwide, my experience tells me that all estimates of casualties during the hot phase of a conflict are normally exaggerated. We might see the same picture here. What is important that every loss of human life on either side is a tragedy. And this tragedy is going for already 4 years. I do not think that we are coming to a peace deal. I would very much like to see the peace deal happening. I think that if we look at the kind of long war of attrition, which perhaps is more plausible scenario, sadly at this point, Russia has a better capacity to endure that kind of, this type of war. Which you can probably go slow, and then fast. That's the idea on the Russian side, because certainly much bigger population, bigger resources, international networks, partners, capacity to produce weapons, also lessons learned from the beginning of the campaign, which didn't start well at all. Ukraine has different vulnerabilities. That doesn't mean that it is on the breaking point, but I think it is not at the vulnerabilities are not at that point which will alone will urge the Ukrainian leadership of making peace, which would require concessions from the Ukrainian side. That might be, in hindsight, history would tell, maybe that would be a wise strategy, but it may be not. Certainly, it's a very high-risk strategy.
Yeah, and again, it's this question of the grid that's been hit so hard this winter, targeted inside of Ukraine. Now, Ukraine has been hitting back deep inside Russian territory, thanks to a mix of homemade drone technology and also U.S. intelligence. France 24 correspondent Gulliver Cragg got an exclusive look.
An oil refinery southeast of Moscow, a drone components factory 900 kilometers from Ukraine, a gas terminal near St. Petersburg.
Українські удари дедалі глибші, точніші і болючіші.
And the kamikaze drones fly almost every night. This team from Ukraine's unmanned systems forces is preparing to send another salvo towards Russia.
These are Ukrainian Luti drones, probably one of the most effective unmanned aircraft existing in the world today. Their range is up to 1,500 kilometers.
Before takeoff, there are just a few finishing touches to be added.
May they burn in hell. That's the main thing we write every time.
Pilots in cars follow the drones until they're airborne. This unit's targets are mostly military, Kasper says, but there is also an effort to hurt the Russian economy.
The West has been a bit feeble when it comes to sanctions, not so much about introducing them, but about enforcing them. So here we're applying our own, highly effective kind of sanctions.
At times, as much as a fifth of Russia's oil refining capacity has been offline due to the strikes. They've also been a big boost to Ukraine's international reputation, says Pavlo Klimkin, a former foreign minister.
For many people, it was kind of mind-blowing to understand that we can target critical assets on the Russian territory and not just close to the border. And people started asking us, Ukrainians, can we learn from you?
That in itself is a major success for Ukraine as the country struggles to convince the world that it is not ultimately doomed in this David versus Goliath fight, but can in fact be a crucial asset to its allies.
Joachim Bierlich, again, how do you cut through the fog of war and know which side is hurting more and whether the conditions are ripe for substantive talks at this point?
Looking at the last weeks, at the last developments, what I see is the growing pressure on the Ukraine to a ceasefire. It's not, let's call it the capitulation as Moscow wants to see it, but I think our American friends exerts a certain pressure, and it's growing on Zelensky to finish the negotiations. And the key seems to be for the Americans, as they tell it, seems to be a territorial deal. It's the region of Donetsk. And under these conditions, the Americans will deliver their security guarantees, even if the Russians are insofar a bit hesitating. There is the key of the actual debate in my eyes.
And it's something that we heard from the U.S. Secretary of State on Wednesday, Marco Rubio, saying the main stumbling block is indeed now that Russia's demand that it keep all of the Donbas, including the parts that are still in Ukrainian hands.
Yes, right.
I think the one remaining item remains the one you're all familiar with, and that is a territorial claim on Donetsk in particular. And I know there's active work going to try to see if both sides' views on that can't be reconciled. It's still a bridge we haven't crossed.
There's active work to see both sides' views that can't be reconciled. But between the lines, Joachim Biederlich, cutting through diplo-speak, is he putting pressure directly on the Ukrainians?
Yes, in my eyes, yes. It's clear. And you see Putin's, for example, promise, or let's call it an invitation of Zelensky to come to Moscow. It's new in the last, let's say, weeks. And Putin's promise, it seems, a promise to Trump not to attack during 1 week now in the deep winter, Kyiv and other cities. You see this, I call this, it's growing pressure on the Ukrainian side. It's clear. Because the Americans would like to get rid of this war. This is for me the key. The Europeans would like, let's say, not to accept these conditions. Would like to impose theirs to some extent. But what the Americans do is, let's say, trying to end this war. This is key for me. Now, a war which is longer than World War I.
Yeah, and you can even, some say, extend it back, of course, to 2014 when the first fighting started.
Yes.
In the eastern Donbas region. Spotted in the palm room of the White House, that's the room that links the U.S. president's living quarters to the West Wing, a framed photo of Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin at their Alaska summit last summer. Last August, Trump brandished the photo, saying it was offered by the Russian president. So you have this photo, Michel Yakovlev, that's hanging in the White House right now.
I'm glad it's not hanging in a frame offered by Putin, because chances are there'd be a microphone or something in it. At least it's just a photo. The frame is American. So at least for operational security, apparently they've done the job. Now, Putin's theory of victory is very simple. It's called Trump. When Trump was elected, not when he became president, when he was elected, Putin saw it that, okay, we're going to win. We are going to outlast Ukraine. In reality, if America supported Ukraine, and with Europe supporting Ukraine as much as it can, which is not enough, but still doing a lot, the theory of victory for Putin would be inverted.
But for now, the U.S. has not cut its intelligence sharing with Ukraine.
Yeah, that's
and
very
it
nice.
has stepped up oil sanctions on Russia.
Yes, so oil sanctions, okay, belatedly, reluctantly, with holes in it and so on, they are applying some form of pressure on Putin. But there is zero political pressure in the sense of, I'm for Zelensky and against you as long as you are prosecuting this war. We've never heard it from the Trump administration. And in terms of weapons, well, they cut the pipeline and now it's the Europeans purchasing the weapons. At least they're still delivering. But no, Putin understands very well that Trump is working for him. And therefore, Ukraine with America and Europe, Ukraine would outlast Putin and they would win. If Ukraine is fighting Putin and Trump, which is the case, well, the chances to win are not that high. A last point on the contradictions. In the US defense strategy, they say Russia is a minor impediment, and it's Europe's business. Europe should deal with Russia. If they believe what they write, then they should tell Putin, we're out of this negotiation. You talk with Zelensky and the Europeans. We'll support them, but the talking is with Europe. Since we, the Americans, want to disengage. I can understand that America wants to disengage, but it's unfair to disengage while remaining engaged, because the way they remain engaged neutralizes Ukrainian and European strategy.
Joachim Bitterlich?
I agree. I can't agree more. It's clear. And through this, you see clearly the pressure on Ukraine and the American, let's say, military support to the Ukraine is limited. And I think when you add what all the Europeans do, they do what they can. Come up, but it is limited too. And we have not all the Europeans which are really in favor of this war. There is a certain fatigue. There's a certain fatigue of a war in Ukraine, yes, and there's a certain fatigue of war even in Western Europe to some extent, I think. And there, this is clear. This pressure which is growing. It's clear.
The pressure is growing. Hannah Shalest, at this point in time, what territorial concessions is Ukraine realistically ready to accept?
Do you understand that this question is just immoral? And that's really awful that we're even asking it. So the criminal came to your house and demanding the kitchen. What you're ready to give, your wife or your kitchen? Honestly, that's really like you're speaking about our territories that we need to give something. You're not speaking about how to punish the aggressor. You're not speaking about how to punish the war crimes that Russia committed during these 4 years. We are speaking about the huge European Union, which is bigger in terms of population, resources, military capabilities, much more than Russia. And we are still speaking about Russia as some dragon from the fairy tales that nobody knows how to deal with. And as a result, you're just like in all those old fairy tales, prefer to give a small girl to feed this dragon instead of finding the knight who can fight this dragon. Honestly, that's probably that is the biggest success and win of the Russian Federation. They created these myths that nobody can win over them, and that European Union should, or the Americans should pressure Ukrainians to give something up. I can't understand why I should give up the territory where my ancestors lived. The town of my grandparents, these days Russians are just destroying. I cannot visit the graves of my family. So why I should give these lands, especially when I know what is happening at these occupied lands? It's not just the land that Russians are taking. Russians need Slavic people. They need a Russification of the people. Look what they are doing at schools, at the occupied territories. Looks for what they arrested plenty of the Ukrainians at those territories. Look how they are changing the demography. Even in Crimea, we have plenty of the United Nations resolutions speaking about the illegality of changing demography of the peninsula. So even the indigenous people need to leave this territory. So let's stop speaking about the territories. It's not 5 square kilometers. It's not a backyard that we are disputing. We are speaking about history, about lives, about identity, about families of the people that are still at the occupied territories.
Hannah Matvieva, I wanted your reaction to that framed photo we showed earlier of Trump and Putin that's been put up in the White House. Is it that Trump is Putin's man, or is it that the United States doesn't understand the reality that Hannah just described?
Well, we all have different pictures of reality. So I'm in that particular sense, I'm quite interested that Putin is constantly keeping a watchful eye on President Trump in the White House. That is, something working under the gaze of Russian president makes you kind of feel pretty together. I guess on a wider point, going back to your previous two speakers, I would say that Russian reaction to Trump's election was not what has been described, in my view, because Trump's first presidency only worsened relations between Russia and the United States. It was Trump who started delivering lethal weapons to Ukraine. President Obama has been very careful of avoiding giving Ukraine lethal weapons and provoking Moscow into overreaction. So under Trump, our relations deteriorated over Syria, over Middle East, over strategic arms control. So in that sense, Moscow was braced for a storm. They are managing Trump. It is not easy for them, as it's not easy for everybody else. So far, they have achieved pretty little. They have achieved something, but nothing of what they thought would be possible. For example, at least some kind of thaw in bilateral relations between Russia and the US, diplomatic properties abroad, opening consulates, maybe resuming flights, this kind of issues which could have been symbolic, that do not require very much, do not require Ukraine making any concessions, but there was no progress on that. What has happened that, yes, United States, Trump, his officials do have certain Ukraine fatigue. It has been going on for a year under Trump's presidency. Not that much has changed dramatically because Starlink is still there. It is a key feature of Ukraine defense and offensive capabilities. We have seen it in the offensive in Kursk region, for example, on the Russian territory. We also see a reduction in financial aid, but military aid under the previous contract is still being delivered. Of course, intelligence sharing, vehicle maintenance, repairs, US personnel kind of advising on operations, advising on tactics, on intelligence, on troops deployment, operational plans. It is all very much there. These people still have salaries, they have subsistence. So in that sense, it does cost the US quite a lot. We are hopeful that maybe there will be some kind of pressure. But on the other hand, we have not seen pressure being put first on Russia, then a bit on Ukraine, then a bit on Russia. Again, now maybe a little bit of signals of some displeasure with Ukraine. But I don't think that either side, either Zelensky or Putin, are very kind of good at responding positively to pressure. My sense that if they do have anything in common, it's more capacity of digging their heels and say, okay, you pressurize me into something. I am going to show you what it actually means. So I think in terms of President Zelensky and his entourage, we have not seen any steps of preparing society to make some kind of compromise or concession. His stance of defiance has been very strong, and it hasn't changed one single bit. So that's not kind of a signal of readiness to compromise in some sort of way. We also need to factor in that President Zelensky comes from acting, drama, entertainment. So this kind of leadership is very charismatic and likes to be popular, likes to be liked by his people, also likes by European, American nations, the rest of the world. So, and here he is on the threshold of being pushed into making something which can be pretty unpopular, as Hannah's remarks have indicated. If there are some kind of concessions, they will be a constituency which will be vehemently against it, would be very vocal. It can be a domestic protest, maybe. And Zelensky is pretty sensitive to that kind of challenge.
To public opinion. Yeah, you mentioned earlier the volatility of it all. For now, the U.S. is still sharing the intelligence. The U.S., which there was also the volatility when it comes to Greenland. We saw the drama of the past couple of weeks. On Wednesday, we saw Denmark's prime minister receive assurances as she traveled from Berlin to Paris, while the NATO Secretary General was telling EU parliamentarians, if you think the European Union or Europe as a whole can defend itself without the US, quote, keep on dreaming. The former Dutch prime minister pointing to the huge cost of ramping up defense spending in a hurry.
But for Europe, if you really want to go it alone, and those of you who are planning for that, forget that you can ever get there with 5%. It will be 10%. You have to build up your own nuclear capability. That costs billions and billions of euros. You will lose then, in that scenario, you would lose the ultimate guarantor of our freedom, which is the US nuclear umbrella. Good luck.
Joachim Bitterlich, is he right?
He is exaggerating, in my view, a nice little bit. But it's normal. He is the Secretary General of NATO. He has to defend the institution. When I look forward, my guess would be in 2 years, we will see a new NATO and we will see a European defense compatible with NATO and where we are able to operate on our own, but where the Americans are still, to a large extent, let's say, putting their umbrella, their protection on Europe. These things will change, in my eyes, in the next 3-4 years.
And so under that scenario, what happens to, for instance, the 38 military bases the United States has on this continent?
They will be maintained, in my eyes, but they will perhaps reduce a bit to some extent. But what they will ask to the Europeans is, you have to do the necessary reinforcements on your own. This means the Europeans have to set up in the next 2-3 years, let's say, a certain quota of 100,000, an army of 100,000 in any time disposable for the defense.
Are the Europeans, Michel Yakovlev, up to it?
Well, a few comments. First of all, it's music to my ear to hear a German ambassador call on for a true European defense within NATO. I agree to that. For about 70 years, the French have said, we, the Europeans, need to be able to do it alone if necessary. We call that European strategic autonomy. And every time I was told by my friends at NATO HQ, stop dreaming. And we don't want the Napoleonic version. Now, the reality is, for me, Secretary General Rutte is anachronistic. When he says, stop dreaming and so on. First of all, American nuclear deterrence over Europe is dead. It doesn't exist anymore today. Because when you have deterrence, it's based on capability and intent. Trump has eviscerated US nuclear umbrella. He's been very open about it. I'm not going to use it. Putin does not believe in US nuclear deterrence today. It's not to say he doesn't believe in US nuclear power. It's he understands full well that this power will not be applied because Trump has said so.
Okay, so concrete question here. In the coming weeks, we're expecting a big speech by the French president on this subject. Does France have the capability today to extend its nuclear umbrella to the rest of Europe?
The nuclear umbrella is a false idea, and I suspect President Macron is going to discuss, hopefully, the realities of nuclear deterrence, and it's not an umbrella. It's a complication in calculation. To give an example, a full strike from one of the French nuclear submarine, the launchers, is equivalent to 300 times Nagasaki. How many times Nagasaki more do you need to pass the message? So it's not a question of, do we have enough bombs? We have enough bombs. So nuclear umbrella is a geographical notion which doesn't apply to nuclear deterrence. And our European friends do not understand the dialogue, the nuclear dialogue. They don't understand it because they've never practiced it, because they were always comfortable under the US nuclear umbrella. Part of what France is doing today is trying to explain the realities of nuclear deterrence. And in passing, nuclear deterrence doesn't exist without conventional deterrence. And in that respect, SecGen is right, saying there's a big effort to be done, indeed. But when I'm saying, to conclude, that he's anachronistic, it's as if US protection was still in existence. Quite frankly, I have doubt, and Putin has doubt. And the main point is, what does Putin believe?
And very briefly on this, Ambassador Biederlich, in ramping up defense spending, the Europeans are going to have to pool their resources. When we see the troubles the French and the Germans have in agreeing to building a common fighter jet, do you see the political will to change that in 2026?
Dear friend, it's needed, absolutely needed, but up till now, I've not seen yet the real willingness of both sides, neither of the French nor the Germans. What we need today is a clear agreement, French, Germans, Italians, Poland perhaps to be added, others will follow. First of all, on a clear willingness, let's say, to build a European defense, well, with a clear link to NATO, I agree. And what does it mean in practice? And when I see the real state of affairs of our armies today, we have been disarming for years and years, underfinancing our armies, especially in Germany, but in France too. And what we need now is a real, where are we? What do we need? What do we find in Europe in the next years? And what can we do via common units or via common armament? We need this more than ever.
Hannah Shelest, when you look back at 2025, what do Ukrainians think about the Europeans heading into 2026?
First of all, we are definitely see the difference and the development if you compare it with 2022. It's now Europe that has agency in security issues, and that's something what NATO received in 2014 when suddenly they started doubting what is the real purpose of the organization. Now the European Union that for 30 years has been struggling to find the common.
Oh dear, choppy connection there with choppy connection because reminder to our viewers who are just joining us, there are power outages in Odessa where Hannah is. Hopefully we can reconnect with her.
Something on
Michel, oh, she's back. We can hear from Hannah Shelest. Hannah, you're back. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I was talking that we definitely see a different agency of the Europeans, that finally Europe realized that they can have the joint defense and security policy, something they've been struggling since 1990s, that they found their agency as the security actors, not only as the partners of the United States. It's already huge development, including psychological development. And we see Europeans as partners because there are more and more joint initiatives between Ukrainians and individual European countries or minilateral alliances. So now, if in 2022 we had a joke that NATO now is welcome to integrate in Ukraine, joking that we have better capabilities. So now this joke is partially moved to the European Union as well, that probably in the end of everything, we will have a new security architecture in Europe where Ukraine will be the core as the only country with the practical experience, and European Union member states would be welcome to join.
Anna Matvievek, very briefly, could you just play London correspondent for us? How do the people where you're sitting right now in the UK capital feel about this call to level up?
Well, the elite is very exciting about it. I'm not sure whether they would actually be able to follow up on it. For the people, I think, for society generally, not very convincing argument because people are very worried about public services, about schools, hospitals, roads, falling infrastructure, and there are a lot of kind of maintenance problems right, left, and center. Of course, immigration. Now, Keir Starmer is in Beijing. Controversial move. Not everybody is very happy. A British Prime Minister hasn't visited China for the 8 years. The government cannot quite decide whether they are a friend or a foe. So that's kind of, but the British economy needs China. Certainly the power equation is that way. But Britain doesn't want, after Brexit, to be left out. Britain still wants to be in their kind of Premier Club, Premier League of the European defences. The question is, what is it going to bring to the table, and where British table is? Is it with the United States or is it with Europe? The elites, some of the elites perhaps feel that they really need to be more with Europe. But there are quite a few others who are not convinced and saying that the United States, Trump or no Trump, is somewhere where our history and our future perhaps lies.
All right, so still up in the air when it comes to Britain. One final question. French prosecutors stated Wednesday that they had grounded a suspected Russian shadow tanker at the port of Marseille. The Grinch, that's the name of the ship, left the Russian port of Murmansk in early January. It's got an Indian crew sailing under a Comoros flag. In October already, the French detained another shadow tanker and let it go after a few days. This nabbing of shadow fleets, that's something that the U.S. has cheered on. Michel Yakovlev, a move like that, is it happening because of the United States or despite the United States?
Neither. I think it's happening because we are collectively becoming more serious about the shadow fleet and testing our mojo also, in the sense that before there were, it's a concern, escalatory and so on. Now we're just fed up. So there are, I think on the EU list, there's something like 594 ships identified as a shadow fleet. I think whenever they are caught with a suspicious documentation, Comoros saying we don't know that ship and that kind of stuff, well, we should put pressure on them and block them. They are a threat. They are an environmental threat. These ships, they are a catastrophe waiting to happen when they transfer oil at sea. So I just hope that the French started the game and that we'll all be at it for the months to come.
All right. Michel Yakovlev, I want to thank you so much. I want to thank Hannah Shelest for being with us from Odessa, Anna Matvieva in London, and Joachim Bitterlich in Berlin. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24.